Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Author Talk with me, Gavin. Today, I am here with author Marc J. Gregson.
Hi, everybody. I'm Marc J. Gregson. I'm the author of the Above the Black trilogy and the forthcoming Behind the Glass. Downfall is my next book's coming out in January, and then Behind the Glass is coming out next fall. So fall 2026.
Awesome. To start, can you tell us a bit about yourself and how you got into writing?
So I started writing when I got bit by the writing bug, probably at about when I was in junior high. My English teacher gave me a spooky Halloween short story assignment,
Yeah.
and I ended up writing, instead of writing just a full short story, it ended up becoming a full chapter.
Yeah.
And so I got bit with that bug, wrote on and off all the way through high school into my mid 20s, where I finally finished my first book. That first book was pretty torturous. It wasn't very good, but I learned a lot from it. And
Sure.
when I started writing my next book, I realized just how much I love writing. And I kept writing book after book after book. And with each book, I got better. I challenged myself to focus and target my weaknesses. And so those weaknesses started to become strengths. And so by the time I wrote Sky's End, which was the sixth book that I've written, I was getting pretty good at it.
And during that, which authors inspired your writing?
There were quite a number of them across age categories, from middle grade authors like Brandon Mull. I really liked his Fablehaven series, and Rick Riordan. Also, I like Brandon Sanderson as well. Ernest Cline, Ready Player One is another one. Andy Weir, The Martian and Project Hail Mary.
Right.
Suzanne Collins with The Hunger Games. Pierce Brown, Red Rising Saga, fantastic series.
What is your favorite and least favorite part of the writing process?
My least favorite part, and this, I've seen some other authors share this, but I think a lot of writers actually enjoy this part of it, which is the first draft. My first drafts I'm a discovery writer, so that means I make up my stories as I'm going along. And because of that, my first drafts tend to be quite terrible, and they're very difficult getting them out there. And I have to restart, and I have this detour in the book that I have to cut out. And so my first drafts generally are my least favorite part. My favorite part of the writing process, though, I love to edit. I actually feel like I'm a better editor than I am a writer, and so I spend a lot of time rethinking my stories, increasing the speed of the pacing, checking on my characters, all of that.
That sounds like the complete opposite of most authors. So, what is a writing hot take you have?
I don't know if I have a sort of hot take. I guess there's a lot of people that will give advice on writing, and I guess my hot take is that writing looks different for each person and what works for them. I think some people, they find that they get really comfortable in the way that they write things, and so then they're like, this is the best way to do it, and other people should be writing the exact way that I do. And I've outlined it before. I do have to outline on occasion, especially as I'm working with my publisher and we have a series and things like that, but generally speaking, I'm making up my stories as I go along, and that's really worked for me. But I've had writers in the past that have told me that I was doing it wrong, that I was supposed to do it a different way. And so I would just say to be wary of anybody who is telling you that their way is the best way, especially if you don't feel comfortable writing that way.
Was there a part of the world building in your story that you absolutely loved or hated?
So in my Above the Black trilogy, I often find that when I'm creating my stories, for me to have a full book, it usually takes two book ideas. So I start with two book ideas, and I start writing it, and I'm like, there's not enough here. And I start writing another one, there's not enough here. And then I sort of blend them together, and then suddenly they work. And so my world building in the Above the Black trilogy involved giant monsters. You had floating islands, all that, which was really cool. But then there was this other part that I really liked, which was this concept of people rising in their society by dueling one another. And you could basically, if you defeat somebody else in a duel, you can take everything they have and their status. You could be a middle and then challenge a high, and then you could take over their manor and everything. And so I really had a lot of fun building the world with both of those two big chunks that became one big chunk.
And so, was there a part from the world building that you loved, but you had to cut from the final draft?
I don't know if there was so much cutting. So the nice thing about being able to write a trilogy is that I am given ample time to explore things. Yeah. And so I guess I would say that in the first book, I got to explore the duels a little bit, but not as much as I wanted to. But as the series progresses, you encounter more duels and you see how that whole system works. And so for me, it was having that fortune of being able to write a whole trilogy really allowed me to elaborate on that. Where earlier on, I wasn't quite satisfied with where it was in the first book, but I knew that I had to leave it there because it would have just been overload. And then I only have so many words. The publisher's only going to publish so many words, right? Especially when I was a debut. And so being able, though, to spread that out over the other books, that sort of satisfied that itch.
And what would you say is your weirdest writing ritual or something you do completely different than others?
I've mentioned this before as writing advice, and I've had people push back against it, but I really, when I'm sitting down to write, so one of the things I like to do is I like to listen to music, some sort of music that inspires the mood that I want to convey.
Ooh.
And so I spend time actually seeking out songs and things that I'm going to listen to. Generally, they don't have lyrics because those are too distracting for me.
Right.
But after I select a song, so I'm like, I feel like just trusting my gut instinct. I'm very salt to taste sort of author. I'm spooning back to the pot and tasting the stew again and again. And I'm like, what does this need? And I'm like, this has a lot of heavy stuff. Maybe I need to have something light and funny. And so I will approach a certain chapter with a specific emotion in mind. And then obviously the chapter is probably, and this is where I've had pushback with people, you can't just have a lighthearted chapter. You got to have other things mixed in there as well. And that's where everybody just has their own opinions on writing. But I find that if I focus on a singular emotion, I'm going to naturally weave in the other emotions in there as well. But it helps me with that sort of salty taste.
Gotcha. On a bit of a different note, when you first wrote your book, or my bad, when you wrote your first book, how did your students react? Did some like you more or less?
Do you mean my first published book?
Yes.
Oh, because they didn't. I told them about my other books that I had been writing, just as a way of explaining, hey, writing is tough, guys. I've been trying to get published for years, kind of thing.
Right.
The reaction was pretty intense, I would say. My students were, when I heard the news that I got an offer for my book while I was in the middle of teaching my 7th period class. And I told my students, and they all started cheering, and I was crying, and it was this really cool moment.
Yeah.
When the book came out, I think it was the last 2 years, it's our most checked out book in our school library that Sky's End is. And so I've probably graded, which was very weird, grading my own book for book reports, getting a lot of book reports on my own book. I don't keep it in my class library, but we have tons of them in the school. And so a lot of kids elect to do it. I've probably graded over 100 book reports, somewhere in that range, just based on my book 1 and book 2.
That's awesome.
So that's been really fun. One of the things I found about middle schoolers is they're very honest. So they'll tell me what they like and they'll tell me what they don't like. And they don't know if that's offensive or not. And that's okay. I'm just really happy to see them reading. Some of them do think that I'm probably going to just give them a good grade because they simply chose Sky's End. And that I grade them the same as I grade everybody else. Did you follow the directions? No. And they're like, hey, why'd I get a C-? I read your book. Like, you didn't follow the directions.
Right. If you were to ever collaborate with an author, which one would it be?
An interesting question. I don't know. I feel like it's interesting when you've read Sky's End, you have to overcome this sort of like lone eagle sort of mentality. But I'm totally a lone wolf when it comes to my own writing. I feel like it could be like many cooks in the kitchen kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would have like specific person that I would want to collaborate with in writing a book. I would like to brainstorm with people. I think it would be fun, like some of the authors I mentioned who inspired me earlier, things like that. That would be very fun to brainstorm with them. But the actual sitting down and writing the book, I want them to be my fingers on the keyboard kind of thing.
I think I'd feel the same way.
Yeah.
And then the final question. You shared huge news about a film adaptation of Sky's End. Could you go into detail about that, or could we get some feedback from you on that?
Yeah. I always have to be careful when I talk about the movie because there's things that I can't say. But we'll say that, so we announced the film back in May 2024. Antoine Fuqua's production company who's on it. I've had several meetings with, team, which has been really cool. We are a screenwriter, and I met the screenwriter a couple months ago, which was really cool having a chat with him and listening to some of his plans. And then just like 2-3 weeks ago, there was another big meeting where the screenwriter essentially pitched his plans for how he was going to tackle adapting my book into a film. And that was pretty awesome. I got like a page, of plans and everything, and got to give feedback and back to the producers. I'm pretty regularly in contact with several of the producers, where I'm messaging them, texting them, and getting little updates here and there. So I'm optimistic. It's not a fast industry, just
Right.
like book publishing, which is very slow. They're also very slow. But about where things are going. So I guess we'll see where it goes from here. But we want to have hopefully a good screenplay by the end of this year.
Yeah, so far, do you feel it's pretty faithful to the books, or?
Yes, I would say yes. It's one of the first things that I heard when I met the film team, and that was very surreal because we were all taking turns telling me, and they're different producers who have different roles and they different things, telling how much they enjoyed my book, but then they were constantly telling me how you wanted to be faithful to it, and they wanted me involved as consulting producer. So that gave me, to have a little bit of a voice in there.
Right.
Obviously, I think that they're adapting, like the audiobook for my book is like 14 hours long, and we're
Mhm.
looking at a movie that's maybe 2 hours long. And so obviously there's going to be cuts, or
Right.
they're going to have to find ways to stitch things together, or maybe weave certain scenes together. But as long as they're staying spiritually true to it, the spirit of the book, that's where I feel pretty optimistic.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Gavin. This was fun.